It's the middle of summer, which is the perfect time to revive a series about hockey, right? But I have a good reason. It's something everyone's talking about this offseason. The Minnesota Wild fired their GM. I'm kidding. Everyone's talking about Mitch Marner. Marner is the de facto representative of this year's RFA holdout class, which includes promising young stars like Patrick Laine, Mikko Rantanen, Zach Werenski, and Keenan Knucklepuck Thompson. Most of these players are expected to sign with their teams by the time training camp begins, but Marner's holdout could extend months into the season. To understand why, we need to look at the changing role of the second contract in the NHL's salary cap era. And I promise to make that more interesting than it sounds. Describing the details of restricted free agency under the collective bargaining agreement would be long and boring, and I want you to like and subscribe, so I'm not going to do that. What you need to know is that second contracts were traditionally seen as a step on the ladder to arbitration eligibility, where a player could either negotiate a long-term deal or reach a short-term arbitration settlement before becoming an unrestricted free agent. Most players reach free agency at 27. But players who enter the NHL as teenagers are eligible to become UFAs after their 7th pro season, and the value of the 4 years between their entry-level contracts and unrestricted free agency is the subject of an ongoing struggle between team front offices and player agents that has consumed off-seasons for the past 12 years. It all started with the Edmonton Oilers, who are known for making good, sound hockey decisions always. The Oilers were Stanley Cup finalists in 2006, but fell flat on their face the following season, dropping to the bottom of the Northwest Division with a measly 71 points. Edmonton's desperate plan to turn things around over the 2007 offseason involved signing Dustin Penner and Thomas Vanek to lucrative offer sheets. The Buffalo Sabres matched Vanek's offer sheet, while the Anaheim Ducks chose to let Penner and his $4.25 million cap hit go to Edmonton, which in hindsight was definitely the right call. Of course, it didn't stop then Ducks GM Brian Burke from getting so mad that he challenged then Oilers GM Kevin Lowe to some sort of barn brawl because hockey, I guess. Anyway, the door was now open for more young players to see big paydays before they reached arbitration, in part because the threat of offer sheets was now real. But some teams were slow to change their thinking on second contracts, which laid the foundation for these now common high-profile RFA standoffs. And when I say some teams, I'm talking about the Habs and PK Subban. I'm not going to get into Subban's polarizing play style. I think he's great and all you squares need to shut your pie holes, but that's just my opinion. This is purely about how Montreal botched his second contract by insisting he signed a 2-year bridge deal at less than $3 million per season, while Subban reportedly wanted a 5-year term and a $5 million cap hit. Neither side would budge, and the holdout lasted a couple weeks into the season before the Habs got their way. Subban ended up winning the Norris Trophy, and his value skyrocketed, leaving the Habs with no choice but to hand him a massive 8-year deal with a $9 million cap hit. A deal which has been used as justification for trading him twice, and one that could have been avoided if Montreal had just signed him long-term for his second contract. The Subban situation revealed the uncertainty that comes with bridge deals, and second contract values have climbed steadily in response, bringing them much closer to values typically seen in a player's UFA years. Most recently, Teenage Hart Trophy winner Connor McDavid set a high watermark with his $12.5 million cap hit, and Marner's Toronto teammate Auston Matthews will be making more than $11.5 million against the cap starting in the fall. But do these young players deserve all that money? Have they earned it? Why don't they show some gratitude to the team that drafted them by taking a hometown discount? If you're asking these questions, you're going to want to stick around. The idea that players should help the team by settling for a below-market salary is a fan favorite that gets trotted out every time a franchise star is negotiating a new deal. But what's in it for the player? Take, for example, the current mecca of hometown discounts, the Boston Bruins. Boston's highest-paid players are David Krejci at $7.25 million and goalie Tuukka Rask at $7 million. The Bruins' top forward line, considered one of the best in the league over the past few seasons, doesn't have a cap hit over $7 million, despite featuring David Pastrnak, one of the best young wingers in the game, Patrice Bergeron, one of the best two-way forwards of all time, and Brad Marchand, seen here grabbing a bite in New York. Marchand gave his thoughts on Marner with a trolling tweet back in March, suggesting Marner could be worth $12 million, which is especially funny when you consider Marchand's value and cap hit. As a top 5 winger in the NHL, Marchand would easily receive offers north of $10 million per season on the free agent market, no question. But the Bruins own his prime years at a cap hit right around $6 million. In other words, Marchand is leaving millions of dollars on the table every season, and that makes him a good team player who values winning above money, right? But what if the winning doesn't happen? Taking a hometown discount is no guarantee of success, and plenty of players have sacrificed millions only to watch the team squander it. Marchand's Bruins came within a game of winning the Cup this past season, agonizingly close to proving his discount, and Bergeron's and Pasternak's all paid off. Would the result have been any different if they were all being paid more and the team had never given David Backes $6 million to watch important games from the press box? And it's weird to think how this franchise might look if it hadn't shipped budding stars like Tyler Seguin and Dougie Hamilton out of town and spent the cap space from those moves on Backes, Matt Bolesky, or any of the other dead weight that roster has carried recently. Don't get me wrong, hometown discounts can definitely help teams win. Again, Boston was a game away from winning it all, as was the team they beat in 2011, the Vancouver Canucks, who were also loaded with team-friendly deals, but that's another case. What I'm getting at here is the flawed notion that taking a discount is always a smart choice for the player. The team still has to make the right decisions, and the possibility of winning will never be as certain as money guaranteed in a contract. Also, just a note, the three most successful teams of the past decade each featured a few players making at least 10% of the salary cap when they won their cups. Really, the only person guaranteed to win when a star player takes a hometown discount is the team owner. In Boston's case, that's Jeremy Jacobs, a notorious cheapskate and the driving force behind the 2013 lockout. Think about that the next time you're moaning about a player asking to be paid what they're worth. Here's what we know for certain. It's the Leafs or nothing from Marner. Offer sheets are off the table since Toronto can match anything under $10.5 million, and any offer over that cap hit would involve 4 first-round picks in compensation, a price no team seems willing to pay. 2. Whatever deal Marner signs will make him one of the 3 highest-paid players on the Leafs, and likely by a sizable margin over William Nylander's nice $6.9 million cap hit. The rest is a mystery. Contract value, contract length, urgency to sign. Most reports say Toronto and Marner are still far apart on terms, and GM Kyle Dubas has the team positioned to weather a lengthy standoff if necessary. At its heart, the dispute appears to be over how to measure a player's value. Dubas and his front office staff are likely assessing Marner in terms of his market value. He's already one of the top wingers in the league, and he's only getting better, but his position and his lack of goal production hamper that value slightly. Wingers tend to command a lower market value than centers, and there are only 2, Patrick Kane and Artemi Panarin, who are earning more than $10 million against the cap. Assists are also less valued than goals when judging a player's stats, which hurts a player like Marner who has yet to score 30 in a season. But all that aside, Marner is still a tremendous player who deserves to get paid a hefty sum. I would put his average annual value somewhere between $9 and $10 million for a 5 or 6 year deal, and as high as $10.5 million on an 8-year max length term. And I get the sense from the leaked reports of Leafs offers that they're in the same range. Marner would be among the top 10 highest paid wingers under this framework, which seems entirely reasonable, except Marner's camp isn't interested in any outside comparables or market values. The way they see it, Marner is as important to Toronto as Matthews, so he should be given a comparable cap hit. For context, that would tie Marner with Panarin as the most expensive winger in the NHL. This isn't going to happen. But that hasn't stopped Mitch's dad Paul from talking out of his ass like the stereotype of every worst hockey parent. So yeah, this probably isn't going to end anytime soon. Marner's situation is unique, but like I said, he's far from the only RFA holdout this offseason, and there were plenty last offseason and the offseason before that as well. Most, if not all, signed before the season begins, but this ongoing game of chicken between teams and young players without arbitration rights reflects a general uncertainty about how to measure a player's value so early in their career. Paying young players top dollar represents a complete reversal of how the NHL used to approach contracts, and it's a risk many teams are still reluctant to take. Looking back at Penner and Vanek, neither player lived up to the hype of their offer sheets. And one can't help but wonder if a player like Sebastian Aho will live up to the offer Carolina matched earlier this offseason. Often, offer sheets only serve to inflate general market values for players, which is a bigger deterrent than any fight barn Brian Burke could rent. And the ceiling of a player's second contract value ends up defined by the various thresholds of offer sheet compensation more than anything else. This is the reason the Leafs positioned themselves to have right around $10.5 million in long-term injury reserve cap space once the season starts. And it's the same reason Aho's offer wasn't a dollar over $8.454 million in annual value. Without third-party arbitration, offer sheet compensation is the only outside framework both sides can rely on. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is a main issue when it's time to renew the collective bargaining agreement. As for Marner, there are millions of dollars already on the table. And no matter how much he wishes it, he's not going to see more than 10.5 per year. It's up to him and his father to decide when they're ready to rejoin reality, but the season is starting in October, with or without them. Hey, thanks for watching the end of the video. Funny story, I was originally going to use Goldberg in that Mighty Ducks reference, but then when I looked him up, here's what he looks like now. So yeah, meth, not even once. But anyway, I'm back to doing these videos after extended hiatus, and yeah, stay tuned for more.